The air in the alien marketplace was thick with heat and dust. Voices rose and fell, mixed with the sound of chains rattling and metal doors slamming. The smell of sweat, old blood, and cheap spice filled the air, making it hard to breathe everywhere. Cages stood stacked in rows, each holding someone who had lost their freedom. In the farthest corner, under a torn cloth for shade, a small rusted cage sat alone. Inside, curled up on the floor, was a young alien girl. Her skin, once a deep shimmering silver, was pale and marked with scars. Her thin arms wrapped around her legs, though her legs themselves were weak and trembling. One of her knees was badly bent, as if it had never healed right. Her large eyes, once full of life, were now dull and tired. She stared at the ground, not daring to look at anyone who passed by. The traders had already given her a name, Broken. They did not say it with pity, but with disgust. To them, she was worthless. No one wanted to buy someone who could not run, who could not work, for days. Buyers passed her cage without a second glance. Some laughed when they saw her. One alien male had even said, "Worth less than a piece of scrap metal," before walking away. The auctioneer, a fat alien with 4 arms and a mouth full of sharp yellow teeth, stood on the platform nearby. He shouted loudly, advertising the best slaves of the day. Warriors with strong bodies, servants with smooth skin, rare alien species with exotic beauty. The crowd cheered for each sale, coins clinking as deals were made. But no one clapped for the girl in the corner. No one even asked her price. As the sun climbed higher, the auctioneer decided to get rid of the last few low-value slaves quickly. He waved toward the girl's cage. "This one. A special deal, dirt cheap." He barked. The crowd laughed. One alien shouted, "Why buy trash? She can't even walk straight." Another added, "Better feed her to the dogs." The girl flinched at their words but said nothing. She had learned long ago that speaking only brought more pain. Just as the auctioneer was about to give up, a shadow fell across her cage. She slowly lifted her head, expecting to see another cruel face. Instead, she saw a human. He was tall, wearing a simple brown jacket with dust on his boots. His hair was dark, a little messy, and his eyes were different. They were steady, calm, and they didn't look at her like she was broken. They looked at her like she was real. The crowd noticed him immediately. "What's a human doing here?" Someone muttered. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and most were merchants or mercenaries. This one didn't look rich, didn't look like a buyer. So why was he standing there, staring at the most worthless slave in the market? The auctioneer laughed nervously. "You don't want this one, human, worth nothing. Just a waste of credits." The human didn't move, didn't blink. He asked a single question, his voice calm but firm. "What's her price?" The crowd went silent for a moment. Then the laughter started, louder than before. "You're joking." A tall reptilian alien snorted. "She's cheaper than a cup of water." Another sneered. The auctioneer scratched his chin, thinking this might be a chance to get rid of her. He named a price so low that even the poorest buyer could afford it. The human didn't argue, didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the exact coins, and tossed them into the auctioneer's hand. The lock on the cage clicked open. The girl didn't move. She stared at the human, unsure if this was another trick. Most buyers shouted, dragged, or beat their slaves out of the cage, but this man simply crouched down and said quietly, "Come on, let's get you out of here." Her thin leg shook as she stood. She stumbled forward, and he caught her before she could fall. His coat slipped around her shoulders, shielding her from the sun. She had never felt something so soft in years. The market's noise faded in her ears, replaced by the pounding of her heart. As they walked away, the whispers followed them. Why would a human waste money on that? He must be mad. She's broken. She'll slow him down. But the human didn't turn back, didn't answer anyone. His steps were steady, and his hand was firm on her arm to keep her from falling. The girl kept her eyes down, but in her chest, A strange warmth began to grow. She didn't know why. She didn't know who he was. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't trash anymore. The path out of the market was narrow and crowded. Merchants shouted their prices. Children darted between legs, and guards stood watching with cold eyes. The human moved steadily, guiding the alien girl away from the noise and heat. Every few steps she stumbled, and each time his hand was there, steady and firm. She still didn't understand what was happening. Her body expected the sharp pull of chains, the sting of a whip, or the cruel laughter of an owner. But none came. Instead, there was the quiet sound of the human's boots on the dusty ground, and the rustle of the coat he had wrapped around her. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked, her voice no louder than a whisper. "To someplace safe," he replied, without looking down at her. Safe. The word felt strange on her tongue. In her life, there had never been such a place. Safe meant another lie, another trap. The road sloped downward, leading toward the outer gates of the city. The guards gave the human a quick glance, but seeing no trouble, they let him pass. She noticed how his steps never faltered, how he didn't rush, but didn't linger either. It was as if he knew exactly where to go. After some time, the noise of the market faded behind them. The air grew cooler, and the smell of dust was replaced by the faint scent of metal and oil. They passed a row of small mechanical workshops and repair sheds. A few workers looked up but quickly turned back to their tools. No one here cared about a human leading away a ragged alien girl. Finally, he stopped in front of a weathered transport vehicle. It was old but sturdy, its paint scratched and faded. He opened the back and helped her climb inside. She hesitated, glancing around for cages or restraints. There were none, only a worn seat and a blanket folded neatly in the corner. "You can sit," he said. She lowered herself slowly, her legs aching. The seat felt softer than the stone floor of her cage. She kept her eyes on him as he moved to the front, started the engine, and the vehicle rumbled to life. For a long time, they traveled in silence. The landscape outside changed from the crowded streets of the city to open stretches of dusty plains. She had not seen so much space in years. It was strange. There was nothing stopping her from jumping out. But she didn't. Somehow she didn't think he would chase her if she ran, and yet she stayed. "Why?" she asked suddenly. He glanced at her through the mirror. "Why what? Why did you take me?" His eyes returned to the road. "Because no one else would," he said simply. His voice wasn't heavy with pity or pride, just truth. She didn't know how to respond. In her experience, no one did anything without wanting something in return. Slavers wanted work, owners wanted obedience, buyers wanted profit. What could he possibly want from her? The sun was beginning to lower when they reached a small outpost on the edge of the plains. It wasn't much. A cluster of low buildings, a few towers with blinking lights, and a fenced area where old ships were parked. He drove the vehicle into a covered shed and turned off the engine. "Come on," he said, opening her door. Her legs were stiff and she nearly fell again. Without a word, he slipped an arm under hers and supported her weight. They walked toward one of the buildings, its walls patched with different metals. Inside, the air was cooler, smelling faintly of engine oil and clean water. It was dim but not unfriendly. A table stood in the center, with a few chairs around it, and shelves lined the walls, holding tools, containers, and food packs. He guided her to a small room at the back. There was a bed, not much more than a frame with a mattress and a blanket. But it looked impossibly soft to her. "You can rest here," he said. "There's water in the jug, food on the table." She stood frozen, unsure if this was another trick. He didn't push her, just nodded and stepped out, closing the door halfway. The silence in the room felt strange. No shouting, no footsteps pacing outside, no keys turning in locks. She moved slowly, touching the bed, the blanket, the jug of water. It was all real. When she took her first sip, the water was cool and fresh, and for a moment, She thought she might cry. She sat on the bed, her thoughts a storm. Why was he doing this? Why wasn't she chained? Why did he treat her like she was a person, not an object? That night, she didn't sleep much. She could hear him in the next room, moving around, repairing something. His voice came faintly through the wall as he spoke to someone, maybe a communicator. "She's not broken," he said quietly. "They just made her believe she is." The words settled deep inside her. She didn't know if she could believe them, but for the first time, she wanted to try. Morning came slowly in the outpost. A pale light filtered through the small window of her room, casting soft shadows across the bed. For a moment, the alien girl forgot where she was. She woke expecting the clang of metal doors, the bark of orders, the heavy footsteps of guards, but all she heard was the faint hum of machinery somewhere in the building. She sat up slowly, the blanket sliding from her shoulders. Her legs were stiff, her body still sore from days without proper rest. For a brief moment, she feared the human might have left, but then she heard faint sounds, the clink of tools, the low murmur of a voice, coming from the other room. She realized she was still free. It was a strange thought, one that felt both fragile and impossible. When she stepped into the main room, the human was sitting at a workbench, repairing a small device. He looked up briefly, gave a small nod, and returned to his work. On the table nearby, a plate of food and a cup of water waited for her. No one had ever prepared food for her before. Without expecting something in return, she hesitated, wondering if there was a hidden condition, but hunger won. She ate quietly, glancing at him from time to time. After a while, he spoke without looking up. "This place is a safe zone," he sighed. "No one here will hurt you." The words made her pause. Safe zone. It sounded like a lie, but his tone carried no false sweetness. It was just a fact, spoken simply. Later, she wandered to the doorway and saw the outpost in daylight. A dusty yard stretched out in front, with a few old ships parked under shelters. A group of alien children played near a fence, chasing a small metal sphere that rolled and blinked with lights. When they noticed her, they stopped, their curious eyes fixed on her. She froze, unsure if they would mock her like others always had. Instead, one of them smiled shyly and waved. It was such a small thing, yet it felt like a piece of ice melting inside her chest. In the following days, she learned that the outpost was a refuge for those who had escaped or been freed from slavery. There were beings from many worlds, tall insect-like workers, small furred creatures with bright eyes, even a few reptilian healers. They worked together, repairing ships, growing food in a small greenhouse, or patrolling the fence for safety. The human moved among them with quiet respect, never shouting, never ordering unless it was necessary. She kept her distance at first. She still didn't trust easily. Years of cruelty had taught her that kindness often hid traps. But every day she saw no signs of chains, no guards with whips, no cruel laughter when someone stumbled. Slowly, her body began to relax, though her mind still stayed alert. One evening, she sat outside near the fence, watching the twin suns sink. Below the horizon, the human came and stood beside her, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "You used to have a home." She turned to him sharply. "How do you know?" "I can see it," he replied, "in your eyes. You weren't born into chains." The words hit deep. She hadn't spoken of her past to anyone here, but memories stirred, her homeworld's shining lakes, the laughter of her people, the halls where she once worked as a healer. Then came the night of fire, when raiders burned her village and took her away. She swallowed hard, unable to speak. "You don't have to tell me," the human said. "Not until you want to." There was no demand in his voice, no push for answers, just the quiet acceptance that she could choose. It was something she had never been given before, the right to choose. The next day, she tried to help in the greenhouse. Her legs were still weak, but she carried small containers of water. One of the older residents, a gentle insectoid, showed her how to tend the plants. For the first time in years, she felt useful. When the human passed by and saw her working, there was the faintest smile on his face. It made something warm bloom in her chest. Though she quickly looked away, at night, as she lay in bed, she heard his voice again through the thin wall. He was speaking to someone over a communicator. "She's starting to come back," he said softly. "It'll take time, but she's stronger than she knows." She lay in the dark, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. She didn't know why his opinion mattered so much, but deep inside, she wanted to prove him right. By the end of the week, she began to realize something dangerous. She wanted to stay, not because she owed him for rescuing her, but because, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was more than broken. This outpost wasn't just shelter. It was the first place since her capture where she could breathe without fear. And that terrified her even more, because if she lost it, she wasn't sure she could survive going back to the dark. The morning air at the outpost was crisp, carrying the faint scent of metal, soil, and the green leaves from the small greenhouse. The alien girl sat outside, her legs folded awkwardly under her, watching the children run across the dusty yard. Each step they took looked so easy, so natural. For her, walking still felt like trying to move through thick mud. The human approached, holding 2 mugs of warm tea. He set one beside her and sat on the bench, his eyes scanning the yard. "You've been moving more lately," he said casually. She shrugged, not wanting to admit that every step still brought a flash of pain. "I can walk," she muttered. "Just not like before." He nodded as if that was expected. Not a failure. A quiet moment passed before he stood and held out his hand. "Come on," he said. "We're starting something today." She looked at his hand, uncertain. "What?" "You're going to learn to stand the way you used to, maybe better," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He led her to the open space behind the outpost, where the ground was flat and clear. The morning sun painted long shadows across the dirt. He positioned her near a low wooden rail fixed between 2 metal posts. "You'll use this to steady yourself," he explained. "Not to hold your weight forever, just to help you start." At first, she hesitated to even touch the rail. Her legs felt like fragile sticks, ready to collapse at any moment, but his steady gaze told her he wouldn't let her fall. She gripped the rail and slowly pushed herself upright, her muscles trembling under her own weight. "Good," he said quietly. "Now take one step." It was harder than it sounded. Her first step was small and shaky, her knee almost giving out. Before she could fall, his hand was there at her back, steadying her without gripping too tightly. She took another step and another, each one a battle. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her breathing quickened, but she didn't stop. When she finally reached the end of the rail, she was shaking all over. She expected him to say they were done, but instead, he said, "Again." Her heart sank, but she turned and walked back. They repeated this until her legs burned and her arms ached from gripping the rail. When she nearly collapsed, he caught her and eased her down onto the bench. "Not bad for a first day," he said, handing her water. Over the next few days, the training continued. He never pushed her beyond her limit, but he never let her stop at the first sign of weakness either. Sometimes he made her walk without the rail, staying close enough to catch her. Other times, he asked her to carry a small weight, forcing her to balance better. Each step she took made her hate the pain a little less and trust herself a little more. One afternoon, as she practiced, a sudden memory struck her. She remembered running across the shining marble floors of her homeworld's healing halls, her legs strong and swift. The image was so vivid that for a moment, she forgot her fear and took a longer step. It almost felt like the old days. She stumbled at the end, but he caught her before she fell. "Better," he said, and she could see real pride in his eyes. She didn't know why that mattered so much, but it did. No one had looked at her like that since before she was captured. No one had believed she could be more than what she was now. That evening, after training, he handed her something small, a pendant shaped like a circle with a star inside. "It's a human symbol," he explained. "It means freedom." She held it in her palm, feeling its smooth surface. "Why give this to me?" she asked. "Because you're not property anymore," he said simply. Her throat tightened, and she didn't know how to answer, so she just closed her fingers around it. Later that night, she stood outside, looking at the stars. The pendant hung around her neck, a strange new weight she didn't want to take off. Her legs still ached. Her body was still far from healed. But for the first time since her capture, she felt like maybe she could get there. What she didn't know was that shadows were already moving beyond the safety of the outpost, and the ones who once called her broken were starting to wonder where she had gone. Somewhere out there, whispers were spreading. A bounty on a silver-skinned alien girl who should have been long forgotten. And soon, that bounty would bring danger straight to her door. The sky over the outpost turned a dusty orange as evening crept in. Wind moved across the open yard, lifting thin swirls of sand like ghosts drifting through the fence. The alien girl finished watering the last row of plants in the greenhouse. Her hands steady even when her legs were tired. She had learned the rhythm of the place, the soft sounds of safety, the quiet rules of peace inside the main room. The human checked a long-range scanner that hummed in a low, steady tone. Most days the screen showed only empty planes and cooling ship hulls. Today a faint blinking dot flickered on the edge of the grid, then disappeared, then came back again. He frowned and tapped the screen, not liking the way the signal moved. Like a predator pacing just outside the firelight, the girl entered, setting a basket of greens on the table. She noticed his eyes, focused and narrow. "What is it?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Could be a stray signal," he said. "Could be nothing." But he did not believe his own words, and she could tell. Night fell, and the outpost lights blinked awake, casting white halos across the yard. The children were already inside, doors locked, metal slats pulled over windows. A small ritual everyone knew well. The girl stood by the doorframe, the pendant of freedom cool against her collarbone. Sometimes a symbol was enough to make fear. "Slow down, but not tonight," the dot returned on the scanner. "Closer now, not alone this time. 3, then 4, then 5. The human powered down the screen and killed the lights inside. Leaving only the yard lamps on, he handed the girl a compact communicator and a small medkit. "If I tell you to hide, you hide," he said, calm but iron. "If I call you, you come." Her fingers tightened around the medkit strap. "I can help," she said. "I remember more now." He nodded once. "Like a promise between equals, not an order between owner and property. Then stay near cover and keep your eyes open." Engines whispered in the dark beyond the fence. The sound like knives sliding from leather. Shapes appeared at the perimeter. 5 figures in layered armor with dull matte helmets and glowing visors. Bounty hunters, the kind who worked for coin and never asked what they were really buying. They moved like smoke and spoke through static, confident and cold. A tall hunter lifted a hand, and the others spread out in a slow fan. His voice crackled through the speaker grill. "We have a claim," he called. "A silver-skinned female, classified as escaped property." The girl's breath hitched, the word property cutting down. Her spine like old chains. The human stepped forward into the yard light. No weapon in his hands, but strength in the way he stood. "No claims here," he said. "She is free." The hunters laughed through metal, the sound hollow and sharp. "Freedom is only a word." The leader said, "Credits are real." He pointed a baton at the gate, and 2 hunters brought up a portable cutter that hissed blue fire. Metal bars glowed and split, the smell of hot iron rolling across the yard. The first shot came from the left, a snap of light that scarred the ground near the human's boot. He moved at once, fast and sure, pulling the girl behind a low cargo crate. Energy hissed past, sparks bit the wall. Alarms inside the outpost started to scream. He tossed her a second kit, smaller and marked with a red cross. "If I fall, you treat first, ask questions later," he said. She nodded. Fear sparking but not burning her to ash, not this time. The human slipped around the crate and fired a short pulse from a compact rifle he had pulled from a wall hatch. One hunter stumbled, armor smoking. Another dived for cover and returned fire in sharp bursts. The yard became a storm of light and dust and metal ringing like a bell. The girl crawled to a broken section of wall to get a better angle, hands shaking, breath quick but controlled. A blunt thud shook the ground, a flash grenade dropping near the door. She saw it in time and shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "Down," she cried, pulling a child who had peeked out back behind the frame. The grenade popped white, and the world went blank for a heartbeat, a hot shock like sunlight inside her skull. Sound rushed back in waves, shouts, shots, footsteps, and a hard grunt that cut through the rest. The human was on one knee, a dark line spreading under his jacket where a bolt had grazed deep along his side. He pressed a hand there and kept firing, eyes clear, but she saw the tremor in his jaw. The girl moved before she could think, sliding to him with the medkit already open. "Cover," she whispered. And he shifted a fraction so his body still faced the threat while giving her the angle she needed. Her healer's hands remembered their old language: gauze, sealant, pressure, clamp. Then the cool hiss of a coagulant spray made from alien tree. Resin and human polymer. She cleaned the burn edge with quick, careful strokes, reading the flesh like a map. "Deep, but not fatal," she said, more to anchor herself than to comfort him. "Good," he breathed, eyes never leaving the hunter's. "Finish fast." A hunter vaulted the fence where the bars had fallen and charged low, a knife bright in his fist. The human swung to meet him, but the girl was already rising, grabbing a short metal rod from the ground. The hunter did not expect her to move so clean, so sure. She slammed the rod into his wrist and twisted. Knife clattered, his visor snapped toward her in surprise. The human's rifle coughed once. The hunter dropped, armor heavy in the dust. The leader cursed and signaled retreat, the remaining figures pulling back toward the breach with tight, professional steps. They had expected an easy claim, a quick payment, a quiet night. Instead they found a wall that bled and still stood. And a broken girl who did not break. "Not worth the loss," the leader hissed, eyes like coals behind glass. "This isn't over," he threw into the wind. Then they vanished into the dark they came from, engines fading into low, angry echoes. Silence returned in rough pieces. The alarms cut off. The lamps flickered and steadied. The girl's breath slowed as she checked the human side again. Firming the final seal, he let out a long breath and finally looked at her. Really looked. "You stayed," he said, not a question, not surprise, only truth. She met his eyes, the pendant cold and bright against her skin. "I remember what I am," she answered softly. "I am a healer. And I am not property." He gave a small, tired smile, the kind that holds more strength than a shout. "We'll need to move them at dawn," he said, glancing toward the houses where the children hid. "They will come again with more men, and less patience." The girl nodded, already counting supplies in her head, already planning routes and triage and water loads. Fear sat in her chest, but beside it sat something larger, a steady flame that did not bow to wind. Outside the fence, the plains looked empty, but she knew footprints hid under the sand. Predators did not forget a scent, and hunters did not forgive. A failed claim, yet the night felt different now, not safe, but honest. She had seen herself move without chains. Hands quick, mind clear, heart steady when she closed her eyes. She did not see the cage. She saw the moment the knife fell from the hunter's hand. And in that memory, her future stood up and took its first real step. Asterisk, the outpost was quiet. Again, but it was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. The lamps outside cast long pale shadows, and the air still carried the faint smell of burned metal from the bounty hunter's weapons. The alien girl sat at the work table, her hands busy cleaning the blood from the human's jacket. He sat across from her, his side freshly bandaged, his movements slower than usual but steady. "You didn't have to fight," he said quietly, his eyes studying her face. She kept her focus on the cloth in her hands. "I couldn't let you fall." There was a pause, then he asked, "Where? Did you learn to treat wounds like that?" Her fingers froze for a moment, and the silence between them deepened. She had avoided telling him the whole truth since the day they met. Not because she didn't trust him, she was starting to, but because speaking it aloud meant admitting what she had lost. She set the jacket aside and met his gaze. "Before the cages, before they called me broken, I was a healer," she said slowly. "One of the best on my world." Her voice softened, almost breaking as memories returned. "I trained for years in the healing halls, learned every method we had, natural medicines, energy alignment, surgical precision." She could almost see the bright marble floors again, the sound of water flowing through crystal channels, the warm light of the learning chambers. "We could save lives others thought were already gone," she whispered. "I thought that was my purpose." Until the night the raiders came, the human stayed silent, letting her speak. "They came in fire and smoke, took who they wanted, killed the rest," she said, her tone sharper now. "They crippled me so I couldn't run, so I couldn't fight, so I would sell for less, easier to control." Her hands curled into fists on the table. "They didn't just break my body. They wanted to break what I believed I was." The human leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but solid. "They didn't succeed." She blinked at him, unsure how to answer. "You healed me out there," he said. "Not just patched a wound. You worked fast, you worked smart, you didn't freeze." His words were not soft comfort. They were truth, heavy and grounding. She felt the heat of something strange in her chest. Not anger, not sadness, pride. "I thought that part of me was gone," she admitted. "But when I saw you hurt, it came back without thinking. That's because it was never gone." He said simply, "They can't take what you are, only what you let them." Before she could reply, a faint alarm beeped from the corner, the motion scanner. Her body tensed until she saw it was just a roaming scavenger creature near the fence. Still, the reminder was sharp. The hunters would return. And next time they wouldn't come lightly. The human pulled up a rough map on the table's display. "They know where we are now," he said. "We need to move before they gather more men." She leaned in, studying the map. "There's an old ridge here," she pointed. "If we take the pass under it, we can travel unseen for a while." He gave her a long look, surprised at her quick thinking. "You know the land?" "I learned to read terrain while escaping raids back home," she said. "It's not just healing, I know." As they planned, she began mentally listing supplies, water filters, medical herbs, ration packs, sealant for wounds. She spoke each item aloud, and he added to the list for the first time since she arrived. She wasn't just following, she was part of the decision, part of the fight to keep everyone safe. When their plan was ready, the human hesitated, then reached into a small locked box under the table. From it, he pulled out a thin metallic band shaped like a cuff. He held it out to her. "This was my sister's," he said. "She was a medic too. Before we lost her in the border wars." The cuff was etched with faint lines that looked like rivers, with a tiny star engraved at the center. "It's a promise," he continued, "to protect and heal, no matter the cost." Her fingers shook slightly as she took it. "This is too much," she said, but he only shook his head. "It's yours now," he said, "because you're not broken. You're exactly who you were meant to be." She wore it on her left wrist, the metal warm from his hands. It felt strange and right at the same time, like a weight she wanted to carry. The rest of the night was spent quietly packing. Children were kept close. Other residents moved supplies into hidden compartments in the old transport. She worked alongside them, no longer hovering at the edge, no longer feeling like an outsider. Before dawn, she stepped outside to look at the sky. The stars faded slowly in the east, the air cold enough to sting her lungs. She thought of her homeworld, of the healing halls, of the lives she had saved before her capture. She thought of the battle in the yard, of the hunter's knife falling, of the human's blood on her hands, and the way she had fought to keep it there no longer. When the human joined her, carrying a bag over his shoulder, she turned to him. "I will not run again," she said firmly. "Not from them, not from who I am." He nodded once, like a soldier hearing the right answer. "Good," he said, "because tomorrow they might find us again, and this time we'll be ready." Somewhere beyond the ridge, the bounty hunters would be planning, sharpening their weapons, counting their pay before they'd earned it. But here, in the cold light before sunrise, the broken girl stood straighter than she had in years, and with the cuff on her wrist and the pendant at her throat, she felt not like prey, but like a storm waiting to break. Asterisk. The sky was still gray when the outpost began to move. Engines hummed low, bags were strapped down, and the old transport's panels rattled as they loaded the last crates. The alien girl stood near the doorway, the metallic cuff warm on her wrist, the pendant resting against her chest. Her eyes were sharper now, scanning the yard not like a prisoner fearing an attack, but like a sentry expecting one. The human came over, a rifle slung across his back, a smaller sidearm holstered at his hip. "They'll come," he said simply. "The only question is when." She nodded, gripping the strap of the med bag on her shoulder. "Then we make sure they don't leave with what they want," she replied. By the time the first light touched the ridge, they were already on the move. The transport rolled over the hard dirt path, leaving only faint tracks in the wind-blown ground. Behind them, the outpost grew smaller, its safety fading with each turn of the wheels. But there was no time for nostalgia. The plan was to reach the ridge, use its shadow to hide, and wait for the hunters to reveal themselves. It didn't take long. A faint dust cloud appeared behind them, too far for details, but close enough to raise alarm. The human checked through a small scope and saw the glint of armor. "They're here," he said, his voice calm. She felt her heartbeat pick up. But there was no panic this time, only focus. They reached the narrow pass under the ridge, walls of stone rising on both sides. The human stopped the transport and ordered everyone into defensive positions. The children were hidden in a small hollow behind the rocks, guarded by two of the older refugees. The girl stayed near the human, med bag ready, eyes scanning for the first sign of movement. The bounty hunters came into view, their black and gray armor blending with the dust, visors glowing faintly. The leader was there again, his voice crackling through the helmet. "You had your chance to walk away," he said. "Now you pay." The human didn't answer. Instead, he fired first, a sharp pulse that hit one of the hunters square in the chest and sent him sprawling. The pass exploded into chaos. Shots hissed through the air, striking sparks from stone. The girl moved low, keeping to cover, pulling one injured refugee back to safety and sealing a wound on his arm in seconds. She didn't freeze, didn't hesitate. Her hands were steady, her mind clear. One of the hunters broke through the side and charged at her. She pivoted, using the metal rod she had carried since the first attack. He swung a blade down, but she stepped inside his reach and slammed the rod into the side of his helmet. The visor cracked, his aim faltered, and the human finished him with a single, clean shot. The fight raged, but they held their ground. The hunters were trained, but they hadn't expected a group ready to fight as one. The human covered the front, precise and relentless, while she moved between fighters, healing where needed, arming the unarmed, and striking when the chance came. When the leader finally pushed forward, the human stepped out to meet him. They clashed hard, the sound of metal on metal echoing through the pass. The leader was strong, but the human's stance was solid, every move calculated. Still, a lucky strike from the hunter cut across the human's shoulder, forcing him back a step before the leader could press the attack. The girl moved in from the side. She swung the rod low, knocking the hunter's leg from under him. He stumbled, his balance broken, and the human's rifle came up. Its muzzle pressed close to the hunter's visor. "This ends now," the human said. The leader froze, his breath loud inside his helmet. then slowly dropped his weapon. The other hunters hesitated. Seeing their leader on the ground, one by one, they backed away, dragging their injured with them. "This isn't worth the pay," one muttered, and just like that, the dust swallowed them as they retreated. Silence fell over the pass. The wind carried away the smell of burnt metal, leaving only the steady sound of breathing and the rustle of shifting stones. The human lowered his rifle and turned to the girl. "You did more than fight," he said, his tone carrying something heavier than praise. "You kept us together." She met his eyes, her own steady and bright. "I am not what they called me," she said, her voice clear and certain. "I was never broken." He gave a small smile, the kind that carried trust. "No," he agreed. "You were always more than they could see." They gathered their people and moved on. Leaving the ridge behind, ahead, the plain stretched wide and open, the horizon lined with the faint shimmer of the next safe place. The girl walked without leaning on anyone, her steps uneven but hers alone. Every movement was proof, not of perfection, but of survival. As the sun climbed higher, she touched the pendant at her neck and the cuff on her wrist. They were no longer just symbols given to her. They were promises she had chosen to keep. And as the human walked beside her, she knew the journey ahead would be long, dangerous, and uncertain. But for the first time since her capture, she felt ready. Not because someone had saved her, but because she had saved herself too. Somewhere far behind them, the hunters might still be watching. Somewhere ahead, more battles would come. But she no longer feared being seen, because now, when the galaxy looked at her, it wouldn't see a broken alien girl. It would see someone whole,